Well, I am live. What do you think of that? Guys, I know this is going to be kind of a quick live video. If any of you can join me, that's great. If not, it is what it is. I want to get this video out to do a follow-up. I did a live video last week called Why Most Bands Fail, Volume 1. Now, for a lot of us, for a lot of people who might not be musicians or maybe have worked in bands, sometimes we see things happening about bands not getting along, people quitting. When we look at a lot of popular bands, we're kind of like, well, why would that person quit? They're making good money. They're playing to thousands of people every night. There's a number of reasons for this, and I wanted to just kind of give my perspective as a free education to musicians out there. As when I started out, I learned everything the hard way. Decades of learning all this, and that was part of why I wanted to do this YouTube channel. So if I can save any of you any stress, heartache, help you get to where you want to go by educating you guys on some stuff that I've had to learn the hard way. Because you know what? When we're young, when we get in bands, we don't realize that we're not made of time. We don't think of time as something that's can end, but once you get on into your 40s, even into your 30s and into your 40s, it's like you realize I'm going to be 50 next month, and I realize that, I'm mortal. Like, I'm more and more aware every year of, like, I've lived over half of my life. And, I like anything, whether it's relationships, maybe jobs, bands, like, man, the time I put into that and what didn't turn out to be what I felt we agreed it would be, I can't get that time back. So do a quick review of Volume 1. Then we're going to go into Volume 2. Okay. So first part, Volume 1, why most bands fail, because it's a battle of personalities. Okay, I listed, and these are my own findings from my experiences. There's different types of personalities. Okay, the first one was a Type A personality, and I said, hey, I'm a Type A personality. I like to get things done. By nature, I'm a leader. I'm not the best follower, but I've worked professional gigs where people are like, dude, we need a smoking lead guitar player. We'll pay you for these gigs, dude. Cool, no problem. I show up. I know what my job role is. I do it. I don't rock the boat. Just say, hey, okay, cool. But to be fair to everyone out there, I want this to be educational to a lot of musicians or up and coming musicians who, haven't invested a lot of their life in different bands and they'd like to learn from my mistakes. Let's look at the bad side for just take a minute. Let's look at the bad side of a Type A. Okay. And when I recall my experiences, if I bring up certain people, whatever, it's not to be hurtful. It's just what I viewed, how I saw things. Type A personality, I was pretty Type A. I like to get things done. I like to get them, kind of know when things were going to be done. I don't like leaving things up in the air for months and months and months. Like, I just don't operate like that. I remember one time I played in a band with someone who was more extreme than I was. This guy, he actually is a good friend, a friend I care a lot about. I keep in touch with him. But he had an interesting personality. He was very Type A, very driven. But he would almost be on the extreme side. And he had a pattern. Again, I'm talking about, I have nothing but respect for the guy. He's done some really cool stuff in his career. I've asked him a few times if he'd like to come on and to do maybe to do a chat with me on the channel, but he's going through a lot right now in his life, and he's a little bit of a recluse. But I remember playing with him, and I remember it was a situation where it was like a kind of a tribute band thing, but I was already in a working band. I had a lot of personal responsibilities at the time. I was working 3 jobs, and I remember I really, tried to help get the band members together and everything. And I really liked the guy. He was just a wicked musician. And we kind of got into this thing, but, I was already stressed for time. That was another thing that I probably shouldn't have done. I try to be more conscious of time and what I'm putting on my plate. Sometimes people have a tendency to take on too much, and then they start freaking out and they start stressing out, and it kind of doesn't end well. But I remember one night, we were doing a rehearsal on the Sunday, and I gigged the night before or something. And I remember just being exhausted. I had, like literally a 70, 80 hour work week. And I remember trying to, losing sleep to get these songs down, and things had to be perfect. If you didn't quite nail it, there was tension. And I remember, I remember being so exhausted, and I remember the strap on my guitar didn't flipped off when I stood up, and my Ibanez RG70, it's got quite a bunch of dents in it or whatever now, but I just remember being so exhausted and getting there. And one of the songs we were doing, and it wasn't one of those guitar solos where it's like there was one bar of the whole piece I didn't know. It was a very long guitar solo, and I improvised. And he flipped out. He got mad. He threw his instrument down, said, and I'm just like, I can't give any more to this. It was always push, push, push. And it didn't end on good terms. I left, but years later, we met up. We just talked about it, put it behind us, and became friends again, which is really good. I have a lot of respect for the guy. But he had a pattern when he get into a band, like if you have a band agreement, okay, like pushing. Okay, well, now we're going to start writing original songs, and now we have to rehearse more every week, and now we have to. He went through an experience that was really cool. I wish I could tell you guys about, but it's not my place to. He had a really amazing audition experience with a very huge superstar in the hard rock world, but and he did really well. He was an amazing musician, but someone else got the gig who went on to a massive gig after that. I think it really affected him. I really think he felt getting the big gig was going to be the answer to all of his problems or whatever. But anyway, love the guy, great guy. But he was an example of an extreme personality, like push. And maybe beyond of just, hey, what's our schedule? What are we doing? That's why, guys, I always go back to what is the original band agreement. When a band starts to fall apart or things start getting weird, always, if there's an argument, a disagreement, just saying, okay, what was the original band agreement? What was the agreement? Okay. I can look back to situations in my life with certain bands that fell apart. I can look back and say, look, like this is what we agreed to do. I carried my end of things. So it's always good to have that. What was the original band agreement? So that's an example of a type A personality that kind of went awry the other way. And again, I mean it with all due respect to that individual. I'm going to add one more personality type. Okay. The personality type I'm going to add is how many gigs? Okay. So we had the personality type A personality, which we talked about. I talked about at great length in the previous video in volume 1. Even keel, that's someone who just gets along with everyone. He just kind of knows how to roll around the rocks in the stream, so to speak. Pretty much gets along well with everyone. It takes a lot to get them ticked off or upset. You've got the stoner, the drunk, and I mean that respectfully. More of the person that, they've got a hard week, maybe, they have they work their job, and at the end, they just want to, play in a band. They just want to jam at the end of the week and just have fun, even though they kind of want it to be a business too and making money, which is a whole different thing we're going to talk about today. Okay, so we've got the 1 foot in, 1 foot out. That's someone who is kind of in the band, but they don't really want to put much work into it because they're kind of like, let's just kind of see, what happened and what will happen. But they tend to cancel a lot of rehearsals, and they kind of aren't making things easy to get things going. I remember I talked about in the previous video of someone I knew who was extremely talented. And Mark, my man, we're on to volume 2, brother. Class is in, my friend. Anyway, I presented a really good opportunity, with all the production I had at the time and all my contacts. And he committed to doing it. And but he didn't commit. Like, he wouldn't really work on the material. He canceled last minute a lot. And it bothered me because he used to always complain about wanting a gig to make money, and I was presenting a good opportunity, and he just wasn't there. And one of the signs, guys, to warning signs if you're ever playing in a band with someone. I remember we had a rehearsal one day. I rented a hall at my expense, not his. And I had someone helping me, and I rolled in the PA and the lighting just to kind of set up the production, just to kind of work on that while we were doing a jam. And, he showed up 2 hours late. When people do that, that's not a good sign if you want to be in a working band that's making money. So that's the 1 foot in, 1 foot out. The stereotypical musician is someone who just doesn't have their act together. Okay, you'll know them because they'll need a lot of rides. Hey, people's cars break down and stuff, but people, whatever. But or people that have addiction issues, or people that have a lot of personal problems. They just don't have their act together. They're hitting you up for loans to get groceries, or, hey, dude, can I get a guitar amp and put it on your Visa? I'll pay you back. They just don't have their act together. Okay. And I mean, granted, as when we're teenagers and we're in our early 20s, sometimes we don't always have our acts together. But as you get older, that gets very tiring with someone like that. We have the resistor, slash procrastinator. That's someone who, a resistor is someone who likes to be difficult for the sake of being difficult. They do not get along with the type A's. They clash all the time. Very tough being in a band with someone like that. Even after time, the resistor, they're going to start really ticking everyone else off because they're affecting things. There's just going to be stupid problems. So usually it's better to go with the type A personality if you want to, book gigs and kind of get things moving. Okay. Then we've got the PW. Again, it stands for something that I'm not going to repeat on YouTube, but we have, I just call them, they're whipped, meaning they're the type, they'll bring their girlfriends to rehearsals all the time, or they might have a partner or a girlfriend who kind of is involved in the band. Maybe they're helping with booking or something. I went in more depth in the previous video on some stories on that experiences I've had. Now, it's only my opinion from my experiences, but when I see a couple in a band, and I mean this respectfully, or maybe if the woman's the manager and the guys, I've kind of seen all the arrangements. Usually there's issues. So, I'm not really looking to be in a business band anymore. The last time that I've really played professionally would have been almost 10 years ago, probably 2013. And I kind of ended with a really professional, good band, and I had a good run with them. So I kind of ended on a good note. But I'm sure there's some that are good. But for the most part, to my memory, most of my experiences with the PWs or the whipped, or you could say P-whipped, it wasn't good. There's problems, there's drama, there's just unprofessional stuff going on. So, but now we've got a new one that I'm including today. It's called How Many Gigs? So you guys will notice a lot in my reaction videos when I talk about music. I really feel that a lot of the core of having a good band is your drummer. Having a good drummer is, that has a good meter, means keeps proper time during the song. They're not easy to find, okay? And usually drummers are kind of funny. I have a friend who owns a really nice recording studio just a few houses down from here. It's really weird because we live out in kind of a remote area. He's got this wicked studio. I'd like to do a video there sometime. If you watch my cover of Aha's Take On Me, he helped me with the mixing and mastering, and I think there might be a little clip there of me in his studio. But we had to talk about that. The problem is all the really good drummers, they are fit into the how many gigs personality, meaning, they're professional, they're musicians, but they're like, look, how many gigs do you have on the calendar? Jerry would like to do a band. You're a good drummer. Okay, how many gigs you got? How many gigs are we looking at playing? Ed, my man, the heel hook master will turn your kneecap into a disaster. Class is in, my friend. We're doing volume 2. Why most bands fail. We're just doing a recap on the first video. Got a lot coming up this week, more reaction videos, some different videos coming up. But the new personality is how many gigs. So again, drummers tend to, like really good drummers, professional drummers, they tend to fit into that because if you don't have many gigs, they just don't want to do it. It doesn't matter how good of a musician you are, especially if you're saying, dude, I just want to do it for fun, or maybe 2 gigs a year, and just they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, no, I don't know, man. I'm looking for work. So you have people that are doing the how many gigs thing. And to be fair, I've had times in my life where I was in that category too. I needed work. I needed money. And that was that. So that, my friends, will conclude volume 1. And now we're going to get into volume 2 of why most bands fail. It is a battle of personalities. So you could probably look through some of your favorite bands, favorite artists. Oh, this personality was this one. This one was that one. This one was. And also a subclause to this is that, it takes time to get to know people. I've had situations where I've committed to bands, audition. They're like, dude, you're smoking. Man, we want you in our band. I kind of hang around and I kind of quickly see things and how people are. Of course, they're very nice and great in the beginning, but as they get comfortable, things start to show. Usually in that type of stuff, there's, addiction problems or just a lot of things can start showing up. It takes time sometimes to get to know people. Okay. So let's erase this. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions at all? I'm here. The professor's in. Okay. So you can look at a lot of different bands and say, oh, I think this person has this personality. A lot of the people that do succeed probably have a type A personality of some sort. And they do tend to get along with the even keels and the how many gigs personalities. But the more professional you are, the higher up you are, there's less room for people that don't have it together. Because, if you look at a big gig, right? So let's say someone's playing for Pink. Okay, the singer Pink, just coming up at the top of my head. She's very professional, multi-platinum artist. If you audition or you perform and you don't have your act together, you'll be gone the next day and there'll be 1,000 people wanting that gig. So let's move on to volume 2, shall we? Volume 2. Education for all of the musicians out there who have not been in bands. So we look at a couple of different scenarios. I briefly talked about in the previous video. Why do most people get into a band? Okay, usually newbies. If I can write it. I'm actually going to change markers, okay? Newbies. Bees. Okay, and also let's just say part-timers. So what I mean by that is part-timers are people that, they work all week and they just play in a band. They just want to do a few gigs a month for some extra cash, right? So that is one of the case scenarios. Okay, but then we also have serious bands. So, more serious musicians getting together saying, look, we want to do a band. We don't have to go through all the stuff that these guys do to have to learn. Let's get it together. Let's get some people. Let's get it. Let's start making money. And then you have established bands. Okay, so established bands are like, and I've worked for some. I get phone calls saying, hey, Joe Quick has quit guitar. He's quit on us. Can you learn 40 songs for next Friday? We got gigs next Friday and Saturday and the weekend after that. And then the Thursday, Friday, Saturday after that. I'm like, sure, I can replace Joe Quick because I'm pretty quick myself. So, I hope you brought an apple. Do you think a band manager should get involved in internal disputes? Well, as the band gets bigger, band managers become very, very important. We'll get into a little bit of that in a bit. Great question, though, Mark. So the newbies, part-timers, they like to get into bands usually for fun. Fun. Okay. Here, money. Or dream of making it big. Okay. The problem is, so we have newbies and part-timers. Okay. So people that are kind of starting to get somewhere in the instrument, they start jamming with some friends. And then we have some part-timers, maybe people that aren't the greatest musicians, but they like to jam on the weekends. It's their coming down time when they have a full-time job. But, maybe a lot of these guys, have kids in university, maybe some extra habits that they want to get some extra cash for. What happens usually is a lot of these situations, people get into saying, okay, well, the band's starting to sound a little better. Hey, what if we book some gigs? Then we can make some cash. We can make some extra money. Beat the system, man. Get paid for having fun, man. Well, there's a lot to that. But what happens is now your band that you're doing for fun, business. So what happens now is a business is a product or service where you receive payment. This changes the dynamics of the fun band, my friends, right? These guys already know that, okay? These guys already know this. They're aware of it. They know they've probably dabbled in it before, have had experience in it. So they're not having to make all the mistakes that these guys have. So then what happens? Okay, cool. I'm going to be racing a lot, guys. We've got a lot to cover today. Now, business. There we go. Now the band has become a business, okay? If you're just playing in a fun band, you get wasted every weekend, you do a few jams, and once every summer, you get a sound system and you play at Farmer Joe's backyard corn roast, and he gives you guys just beer and says, here, have fun, I'm paying you. That's fun, okay? But once you get into a business, now we got some new things happening here, okay? First thing, you want to do originals? Or you want to do covers? So, how badly do you need money? Originals for me, when I've been in bands and people have talked to me about doing originals, I like to really, not that I'm a control freak, but when I write music, I want to write music. I want to have some control over it. I've been in some situations where I've done it in a democracy. It was okay. But originals are very tough in the sense that you put a lot into them. There's a lot of work into them, especially if you get into the studio and you're recording. It's a lot of money. You don't get much of a return. Okay, that dream of making it big becomes it's very tough. I'd never want to discourage somebody. There's a lot of great stories about people who have overcome a lot and become famous or done well. But the problem is with originals, nobody knows music, right? So if you take your band and say, hey, we're an original band, can we play in your bar? And you're sitting there playing, you might do some showcase shows, maybe some whatever. Great. If that's what you want to do, no problem. But for the most part, it's hard making money doing that. When you play in a metal or hard rock band, I find it almost becomes even harder. If you're doing country originals with a few covers, but being in an original metal band, it's great. It's funny. My recording friend the other day, he introduced me to an amazing drummer. Blew my mind. This guy was so amazing. And he's in a death metal band. He can play different styles, but he's in a death metal band. But he's been doing it for years, and his band was good. Like, really good. Their videos had good production. His playing was just like, oh my God. But I told him, I said, I've been there. There's not much of a market and money for that. Like, I mean, my memory of doing that kind of music was, recording where you're putting out money, then you have, there's a vehicle that the band used to travel with. Well, then you had to help pay insurance and gas and everything. And you're traveling really far distances to play gigs that if you're lucky, the band might get 50 or 75 bucks together, right? And they're sleeping on a lot of people's floors. Okay, that's cool. But, as time goes on, you start to realize as you get older, you're like, I've really invested in music and I'm not getting a lot back here. I'm putting out a lot of, so eventually you might switch over to the dark side or you start playing covers. I think my dog needs to go outside. So if you hear a little dog running, that's what's going on there. He has impeccable timing for that kind of thing. So anyway, covers. All right. Cover music. If you're in a cover band, probably have better chance of being booked. If you're a good cover band, you can go play at a club. People recognize the songs. People get up and dance. People drink more. Bar owners love that. Okay. If you're an original band, it's kind of, it's really tough. I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from doing that. I've heard and seen a lot of bands. What they'll do is they'll have an original band where they can play their original showcase stuff. Then they will have a cover band at the same time. So on the gigs where they're not playing their originals, they're playing cover gigs and they're making money. They're getting paid. Okay. Might be tough, big investment of time and effort, and you better get along with everybody. I hope the battle of the personalities isn't going on. But so eventually some people just, maybe it's a tribute thing. There's some really good tribute acts out there that make a few bucks. Again, we've had the pandemic. We've had the change in the world that way. I haven't really played live in almost 10 years. So the landscape of performing live might have really changed. So the next thing we come to is, what type of band are we going to be as a business? Are we going to be a democracy? Or are we going to be a dictatorship? So I had a democracy is really easy to define. A democracy is like, okay, I got my buddy Ed, I got my buddy Mark, I got my buddy, SA, I've got, we all say, okay, we're all going to equally take part in the work. We're going to all pay for the expenses. We're going to do everything. Mark's going to get the posters printed up. Ed's going to be our booking guy. I'm going to be the website, social media guy. You know what I mean? You divide it all up. Now, apparently there's problems with that. We'll get to that in a second. The other way is a dictatorship. And you could probably look at some of your favorite bands or artists, and you kind of probably see some of the bands that really succeed. A lot of them are a dictatorship. Some of them are dictatorship, or some of them are maybe almost a partnership. Okay, like I would say Hetfield and Ulrich from Metallica are a partnership. Dictatorship, we've talked a lot about Prince on this channel. Dave Mustaine from Megadeth would be an example of where the band probably is a dictatorship. You can probably look through a lot of different bands and kind of start piecing it together yourself. So, but a dictatorship, I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. When I had my country classic rock band back, I'm going to say 2007, 2008, we played all over my region. We were a distant second to the #1 band in the area, and they made a lot of money. They were ridiculously popular. If they came to your town and they came to your arena, the arena would be sold out. But these guys were smart, but it was a dictatorship. The guitar player ran the band. He also sang. He was a decent singer. He also was enough to have a really good singer playing bass with him. But anyway, he ran the band. So that meant he was a booking agent. So he did that. He booked the band. He had the sound system. So that's another thing a lot of people say to me, well, should we get a PA system? Well, if you want to make money, you should have your own sound system and a little bit of lighting. So what does that mean for a lot of you out there that aren't musicians? So the sound system, when you have the mixing board, you get an input from all the other instruments, the vocal mics, and you mix it. It comes out those speakers on the side of the stage. The bands that do not have a PA system, it's a lot less work, but you're probably not going to get as much work unless you're that good. You can play in all the A clubs that have a PA system and a sound guy. Now, those tend to be few and far between, and that's a lot of driving. But if you have a sound system, like I did in this band, and we also had some lighting, I was extra work to set it up and take it down. But we were busy. We were playing 2 or 3 times a week, and decent paying gigs, good paying gigs, because we provided our own sound, right? Farmer Joe's corn roast, if he contacted me, I'd say, okay, well, it's going to be, whatever it was, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000, whatever it was. But we're bringing our own sound and lighting, and, we could play anywhere because we had that. Now, it's a bigger investment financially, but that money came back very quickly. So, something else to look for. The dictatorship, he'll be the booking agent. He'll own the PA system. And it's basically, he shoulders the expenses. But he takes a much bigger cut. So for a lot of people, that's taking on a lot of work. But this guy who was in my region, who's actually a friend of mine, someday I'd like to have him on as a guest. He had a very impressive PA system, lighting. He had volunteers working for the band. They were that popular. They made ridiculous amounts of money for playing cover songs, but they had a good live show. They had good lighting. They were just ahead of all the other bands in that way. And they had great sound. They had a really nice van pulling a really big cargo trailer full of all their equipment. They were just ahead of every other band in so many ways. People would pay the money and also they were good-looking guys. They took care of themselves. They had the nice tan, the haircuts, the bleached teeth, worked out. So that meant that, you know, when they would get to a gig, all the girls would be there. Well, if all the girls are there, you know, the guys are going to follow. But anyway, a friend of mine, he made ridiculous money dictatorship. Now, the downside to that is he had to be ruthless at times with letting people go. And he was very protective of his business. That's his bread and butter, as he should be. So now if we look at the negatives, okay, what are the negatives of this? Okay, well, the democracy. Being a type A personality, when I was in a democracy with people, I really struggled with it at times. Why do you think that is? Because not everyone would do what they were supposed to do. They would slack, they wouldn't do it. I told you guys a story about when I was in a band with a resistor, and it was a democracy, although we had a band agreement. He was supposed to do the website. 9 months went by, and I started kind of trying to politely say to him, hey, when do you think, what's going on with the website? And he got ticked off, you know, and I had to get a little bit pushy about it. But then in the end, I quit the band after a year because he didn't understand. I'm like, dude, I'm not here forever. I've not given my life to you. You know, like, you know, we have a saying in English, do something or get off the pot. And it was just going to be like banging my head against the wall against this person, with this person who was just very difficult all the time. And it just wasn't going to be what I didn't want it to be. And I just got tired. I was like, okay, I'm out of here. You know, you have to know when to cut the line and say, hey, like, I'm not made of time. Like, this just is not going to be what I want it to be. So democracy, that was the biggest thing. Like, people just, you know, is everyone equally going to do? Now, I'm sure there's examples out there of bands that are really good functioning democracies. They probably have good communication. Their personalities all gel and they work together. But, you know, but again, if you're in a democracy and you have someone who maybe has an addiction problem or doesn't have their life together, like the stereotypical musician, can you expect them to do, like, to get the posters printed up and distribute them for your upcoming gig in 2 weeks? Like, can you really expect them to do that? You know, democracy, right? You have a PA system and lighting, so you have to get your own amp, guitars set up, or your drums. You have to bring everything in. But then on top of that, you got to bring in the big PA speakers, microphones, the stands, all the cabling. You got to do all that. It's a big work, you know. I've talked a lot, you know. We discussed Prince. Prince was a phenomenal musician. Obviously, that was a dictatorship, as it should have been, his band. But you know, he does these after shows, and I'd be sitting there going, man, how does he do that? Well, not only does he have a lot of energy and he kept himself in good shape, but he would have road crew. So when he left his gig, he could just throw his guitar and go to where he's going to have the after show. The other guys would have to worry about lifting speakers, transporting stuff, wrapping cables, packing road cases. I never had that luxury. And when you're in a band, democracy, people not pulling their weight. Warning sign, I've said before, for you guys to, you know, if you're in a democracy, especially if you have your own PA and sound system, missing load-ins, meaning people arrive late so that you guys have already done all the work bringing everything in. Late for load-ins. Now, to be fair, things happen. You know, where I live in Canada, we can have some brutal winters, and one of the things I just don't want to do anymore is driving in brutal winter weather. I've done some insane driving to some gigs where I'm like, was this worth my life? But things happen. You get in a snowstorm, you get stuck in the snow, something happens, you know, your Aunt Gerda, you know, is really sick. You got to take her to the hospital. Sometimes people are late for load-ins. Things happen. A good band will say, okay, dude, no problem. But when it starts happening often, well, that's not a good sign, guys. Okay, you're putting your trust in a business. That's the saying. I don't like putting, you know, my fate in someone else's hands, right? So someone being late for load-ins is not a good sign. And, you know, I could sit back and think of more and more situations of warning signs and different personalities. I'm not saying I was perfect, guys, but, you know, I always wanted to get the job done. And you know, I would know when it was time to cut the line and say, okay, I got to cut my loss here and get on with things. There is a time where you need to have some compromise. You have to have some understanding. Hey, you know, my uncle died. I was close to him. You know, can we just kind of slow the band down for a few weeks? I got family stuff to do. Cool. You know, you'll find a lot of famous bands when people were in their early 20s and they had, they had kids or they had deaths in the family, they didn't know how to cope with it. And the band would give them flack saying, hey, what about the band? Look into Peter Gabriel when he left Genesis. There's an interesting story there. But having a bit of compassion and some understanding and good communication is important. But when people do not pull their weight, right? I remember one time being in a band with a guy. You put a promo kit together. This is the early 2000s, late 90s. You'd have, the band bio, all this different stuff. Your letter to whoever the gig owner was or whatever. I had someone criticize me for mine in the band. I said, oh, no problem. I would like it if you took some, because this person was a phenomenal musician. They didn't get the business end of things at all. And I remember saying, could you write your version of it and we'll kind of compare and we'll just see, how I can improve mine with what you want to add to it. Did the person ever do it? There'll always be warning signs. But the democracy or dictatorship, I told you guys the story of when I was in a 3-piece country classic rock band, and eventually I left. I had a lot of investment in that. It took time to build the band name. I just got tired of the BS and the disrespect. But looking back, I wish I ran it as a dictatorship and just got a couple of new people in, because I put a lot of work into that band. It might have been a viable business to this day. But nonetheless, democracy part, it can work. But usually it can also be faulty with people not pulling their weight. There'll be warning signs, right? If Joe says, hey, yeah, I'm going to do a band website. I don't even know how important websites are now with social media and everything. I don't know if a lot of popular bands still do. They probably do, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I'm going to do the website. Cool, man. So what kind of time frame are you thinking to have it up? Oh, 9 months. 9 months and it's still not up? Oh, so anyway, you guys, these are things that you have to watch out for, right? Now the problem is if you are in a dictatorship, this is how a lot of musicians, when they don't get it, the dictatorship, all right, the person who runs the dictatorship is doing everything, paying for everything. You just show up and get paid and do the job how you're required to do it. But then a lot of these musicians who are working for the dictator will get together and say, oh, yeah, but I don't know, man. Shouldn't we get paid more? And they have no clue. The person's probably into the band for tens of thousands of dollars for equipment, all the communication with bookings and expenses for advertising and everything. That's the situation I talked about in the previous video, and you're just sitting there going like. And again, one of the things that this sounds really lame, and a lot of you out there might laugh at me for this. One of the things that if a lot of musicians would do, things would go a lot better for them, is if they just took a second to appreciate things and appreciate people. Human nature, whether it's our planet, relationships, jobs, bands, whatever, our own health, when we have something good, we tend to, instead of nurturing it, squash it. It happens in bands. If you've got that guy and he's going out of pocket and he's really busting his butt for you and probably doing a lot more work than you are, do something nice for him. Hey man, we're at the gig tonight. Dinner's on me. I appreciate you. Little things like that can go a long way. I've been in bands where you've tried so hard, you've taken on expenses. I told you the story about I had a guy, his wife was kind of causing problems in the background, and sometimes you would not know if you're emailing him or her. And I remember, I left that band. It was a very mediocre band, and I left it for a much more professional, popular band, much better gigs, much better pay. When that happens too, I would be happy for the musician who got the better gig, and I'd wish them all the best. But a lot of people don't see things that way. And it's kind of weird because when you really do things and you don't feel appreciated, when it's time to go, you're like the worst person in the whole world. But they didn't seem to appreciate you when you were there. I know I'm getting into some weird territory here, guys, but playing in a band is not, there's a lot that goes on. And one of the things I would just say is, the people that are really trying and doing stuff, I told you guys that story again, I'll finish that story. When I left that band, I got quite the email from the wife, not a band member, but the wife, ripping me apart and everything. And the funny thing was, in that band, we took on expenses and we didn't tell him because he would complain about money, and money was tight for them all the time, as she would. And I drove him to all over the region to gigs, and I never once asked for a cent of gas money, but that didn't matter, right? So when we got paid, I would have to take out the extra expenses. I'd have to take out the money for travel and gas. He never had to do that, but I was still the bad guy. Anyway, guys, again, I'm going to start winding this down. But one of the things, man, when you're in bands, and if you have a guy that's booking a lot of gigs for you, let him take an extra 10, 20 bucks a gig, whatever. You know, if people would just show a little bit of appreciation and put that into bands, you know, this dictatorship thing here. I told the story of it would be 11 years ago. I played in a band that I enjoyed. It was cover, it was hard rock, good guitar stuff. And, you know, normally when the guy that provides the PA system and the lighting, he takes an extra, usually $200 or $300. I didn't ask for any of those. Kind of like my gift to kind of help the band get going. And instead of like, and I was under the impression that everyone would kind of help me load in and help me set up. I had an extensive guitar rig at the time. I was exhausted by the time we got set up, and I seemed to have to do everything. And then the other night, everyone got drunk and would just hop in the cab and leave. And I'm there for 3 hours after wrapping up cables. I had friends coming up to me like, he's like saying, dude, they're good musicians, but they're nowhere near your level. Everyone knows that. Why are you doing this? So that happened for 2 gigs, and then I kind of wrapped it up and I moved on, and they kind of struggled after that. But when you have something good in your life, guys, and I'm telling you this as musicians, treat it good, right? That talent, and they eventually go on, they want it, they get a better gig. Be happy for them. Say, hey, dude, can you just help us finish out, or, you know, whatever. It happens. Don't squash it and be sending mean messages and, the stuff I've seen, guys. Why I started this channel, again, I know I do a lot of reaction videos. It seems a lot of people out there, they like because of my experience, my education, my musicianship, whatever. They like my take on things. And that's great. And again, part of why I wanted to start this channel is I want to do something different. Musical, guitar, whatever. But I also wanted to help musicians out there that don't know this stuff. Nobody showed me. Can you imagine if this was like 1993 and I had a YouTube channel of me talking how much money, stress, heartache, and wasted time and drama it would have saved me? So I hope people, when watch my channel, you know, whether it's now or 20 years from now, when, you know, I hope people can just get that and say, wow, this guy's doing a good thing, because I had no one teaching this. I had good musicians. I had good guitar instructors. I studied with privately PhDs in music, but I didn't have anyone to sit me down and say, hey, this is how it works, bro. These are things you got to watch out for, man. You know, these are the things you got to figure out. So the second, volume 2, we can kind of sum it up as why a lot of bands fail is for the business. It's not just a fun band anymore. You want to be a business. Now, which route are you going to go? The originals, which can be worthwhile and they can pay off, but it can be a tougher road. You're not going to get financial return as fast as going to the cover way, right? But I'm also going to tell you, my friend who ran the dictatorship, one day, he was very protective and private with his business, and you know, he was navigating in a sea of sharks, and he had a big golden goose or cash cow, and he protected it. A lot of people question his ethics on it, but I got it, you know. And for whatever reason, he always liked me, even though I was a distant competition to him. But he always liked me, and he told me some really good pieces of wisdom. I'm going to share you guys one of them. One day he said to me, the big secret to having a good business is to look at business through your potential customers' eyes. He said most bands don't get it. So what he means is, okay, of course, you know, you don't want to take criticism. You don't want to, but look, this can apply to YouTube too, right? You know, what do your potential viewers want to see? You know, I do a lot of stuff that people want. I get a lot of requests. I'm doing some videos like this that aren't going to get, sadly, aren't going to get as many views. I understand what my audience wants to see, and I work with that the best I can. When you're in a band, when you're in a band, is your band good? Don't take advice from friends and family who aren't musical. They're going to say you're awesome. And then if you go to your first gig and you get a lot of negative feedback, everyone's like, oh my God, how could they say that? Well, maybe you do suck, right? You have to really be able to look at yourself objectively and say, is this good? Why would a bar only pay us, I don't know, $500 to do a gig there? I don't know, whatever the money is. Why? Are we good? Is our sound good? Are we entertaining? We've talked a lot on my channel about Prince. Yes. I've talked to you guys. When you are an achiever and you work hard at things, you're going to have to deal with jealousy. To a lesser extent, I've had to deal with it in my life. It's affected friendships. It's like, why be jealous of someone? Just work harder if that's what you want. But I've had that. I can distinctly remember bands where the audience members would say after a gig, I'd hear them, they'd say, oh man, you got a smoking guitar player, and the bass player, the drummer say, yeah, he's pretty good, whatever, just to kind of, but it would piss them off. It would make them angry. They would be like, it was so stupid. So then I'd be playing saying, okay, I'm not going to open him up as much and be quite as showy. I'm not going to play this lick because, it might upset them. It was just stupid because that ended up holding me back. It gave me a complex that really held back my ambitions and my career as a musician. But that was a big piece of advice. He said, the key to business is to be able to look at your business through your potential audience's eyes. If you're not sure, book a gig. Have an unrelated friend who is a musician. Maybe he works in the studio. Maybe he's played in a lot of successful bar bands even. Say, come out to the gig, buy dinner. Just give us the brutal truth, right? I have a student of mine. He's in a metal band, and they're a good metal band. And he came to me 2009, maybe 2010. I hadn't heard from him for a few years, and he contacted me out of the blue. And he said, yeah, I'm in this metal band, and I'm working with a singer. Can we just take an hour of your time? I just want to get your feedback. So he came in, he played me a demo. I said, okay, like, do you really want my feedback? Because I'm going to be brutally honest. And he said, yeah, and I was brutal with it. And he said, well, what advice can you give me? And you know what? They're doing well. They've done some tours. They have albums out, and they're very professional, and they're a good band. I might do a reaction video to them one of these days. He took all my advice like a champ. He sought it out. I gave it to him, and it really helped him, and it helped him kind of cope with a lot of this stuff that we're talking about too when it came up in his band's history. So, goodness, guys. So anyway, that is volume 2. Once you get into the business thing, that is another reason why most bands fail. I hope this helps you out there. For people that aren't really in bands or musicians, I hope you might find this interesting. You can start to look at some bands, biographies or autobiographies about bands or artists, why things start falling apart. Sometimes it's a battle of personalities. Can you imagine being on tour or being in a bus with someone for 3 months that you really don't like, but you have to get along to make money? A lot of different things happen in bands. But anyway, this is volume 2. This is getting down more to the business end of things. Now, I was just a regional musician. Like, I was not an international musician. So, as my friend Mark asked, once you get to this point and you're starting to really do well, maybe if you're original, you get signed to a record label or you're getting a big following, then you can justify having a business manager start helping with the organization and doing all the stuff that needs to be done. If, dictatorship, at some point, they're going to have to relinquish some control to a business manager too, to help them. And it can be hard for them because they just want things done when they're supposed to be done and done right. So guys, again, I could go on forever on this stuff, but I hope this really helps out a lot of the musicians out there. Also, battle personalities, but in the beginning, it's like dating, it's like relationships too. People put their best foot forward. Best foot forward in the beginning. People, once they think they kind of have you, once you commit, people change. They get comfortable, and you start to see other things. I was on a website a while ago, and I was on it for too long. It's like band members looking for the band members, right? When you're a musician, it's in your blood. It might go dormant for a number of years, but even for me now, At times I think about playing with some other people that I'm like, oh, what's that going to involve? What kind of people will it be? Is this because I have the history of learning all this? But this website is very popular. You put up a profile, but this website is very popular. You put up a profile, but to me, it was like Plenty of Fish. It's like a comedic horror show. It's like most of the musicians that you wouldn't want to play with, most of them didn't even use their own profile picture, and none of them had any reference of music or their talent level or playing. And a lot of people were just like beginners, and so I closed my account down very quickly. But just to see if there's any decent musicians I've relocated. I regret. Thank you guys for joining me. Not our typical fare, but this is more of a class, a lesson. But I hope even if this helps one musician out there down the road, saves them a lot of heartache and a lot of trouble, or they can have a better understanding of how things work, then I've done my job. So remember, folks, practice hard, but practice smart. See you soon.